translation is not yet there. Let's give it a try first, and then we see how it goes. So, excellent. Thank you so much, and let me welcome you to this session, and I hope you had like an enjoyable lunch and getting ready for the coming two sessions that we'll have this afternoon. First, let me thank the Aswan Forum for inviting me to moderate this session, and hopefully it will be as interesting as the previous sessions. Well, in this session, we're discussing climate risks and opportunities, the water, food, energy ecosystem nexus in Africa, the current volatile international situation with the disruptions in energy and commodity markets is triggering a food crisis with far-reaching implications on development and stability in Africa. Many African countries reliant on food and fuel imports are particularly adversely impacted as they still grapple with the socio-economic ramifications of COVID-19 pandemic. Concurrently, climate change manifestations, including frequent and intense droughts, floods, rainfall variabilities, in addition to the unsustainable management of natural resources, are jeopardizing water and food security, increasing tensions, and inducing forced displacement across the continent. Furthermore, the sixth IPCC assessment report highlighted that climate change has already had adverse impacts on human systems, including on water security, food production, and health. These effects of climate change are cross-border in nature and thus calls for effective, cross-border, adaptive, and cooperative approaches, including through water, food, energy ecosystems. This is critical to address these cascading risks with their serious implications for stability and security in Africa. Let me share with you some elements on water, energy, and food. They are vital for livelihoods, poverty reduction, sustainable development, and sustainable peace. The three resources are strongly linked. Any impact on one affects the other two. Due to the current and forecasted increase in global demand and pressure on water, energy, food resources, and the strong linkages between water, energy, and food sectors, the nexus is increasingly being recognized as an approach to effectively manage sustainable development and thus contributing to stability. According to the OECD, a 55% increase in water demand by 2050 is predicted. The FAO projects that food production will need to increase by 70% by 2050, and the IEA expects energy demand will increase by 40% in 2030. At the same time, climate change impacts and risks are becoming increasingly complex and more difficult to manage. Recent IPCC reports highlight increased pressure on water, energy, and food resources, which further justify the need for a coordinated and integrated approach. For food, the recent IPCC report shows that climate change will reduce the food production in Africa by a 34% decrease in agricultural productivity growth compared to 1961. For the water component, the IPCC report shows that the greatest impacts will mostly be felt through water resources. Recent extreme variability in rainfall and river discharge across Africa have had largely negative and multi-sector impacts across the water-dependent sectors. Against this background, this session will discuss the effective cooperation and adaptation measures, including through water, food, energy ecosystem nexus, in the context of cascading risks and rising climate impacts across our African continent. It will also consider relevant approaches on regional and continental levels that advances sustainable development and promote peace through strengthened cooperation, while highlighting the role that partners and financial institutions can play to promote inclusive regional integration. Mindful of this success, my first speaker is His Excellency, Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, Excellency Kobnan Kwasi Adjoumani. We are mindful, Excellency, of the successful Ivorian experience in post-conflict reconstruction and development. Côte d'Ivoire has been a long-standing advocate for food security and action for nutrition, especially through the establishment of the Regional Center of Excellence Against Hunger and Malnutrition, in collaboration with the WFP and the African Union and the West African Health Organization, for strengthening capacities and South-South and Triangle cooperation in this regard. So, Excellency, current geopolitical tensions have triggered a global food crisis which is negatively impacting our African continent. At the same time, climate impacts are aggravating food and water insecurity. In your view, How can Africa, working with its partners, advance integrated responses to these challenges? Noting that food fortification is at the heart of the African Union's Agenda 2063. So, Your Excellency, I give the floor to you.
Merci, Excellence, Monsieur l'ambassadeur, directeur général du Centre international du Caire pour le règlement des conflits, le maintien de la paix et de la consolidation de la paix, directeur exécutif du Forum Assouan pour une paix et un développement durable, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs et les représentants des organisations internationales, chers participants, chers experts, partenaires internationaux, représentants du secteur privé et de la société civile, Mesdames et Messieurs, le thème Nexus, eau, énergie, alimentation en Afrique, renforcer la coopération pour maintenir la paix, revêt pour nous un enjeu primordial pour le développement de notre continent. Je voudrais donc, dans le cadre de ce panel, focaliser mon intervention sur un pan important du renforcement de la coopération pour maintenir la paix, à savoir parler des projets favorisant l'intégration régionale. En effet, de tels projets permettent de développer des leviers productifs qui apaisent les tensions sociales de tous ordres entre les populations vivant dans les zones frontalières et qui se partagent plusieurs ressources naturelles. Par exemple, dans mon pays, la Côte d'Ivoire, l'un des pans de la vision du président de la République, son Excellence M. Alassane Ouattara, en matière d'intégration régionale, consiste en la création d'espaces ouest-africains plus intégrés qui sont profitables à l'émergence d'une paix durable. Dans ce cadre, un projet intégré qui couvre la région Ouassoulou, qui est à cheval sur le Mali qui est au sud-ouest du Ouassoulou, la Guinée au nord-est et la Côte d'Ivoire au nord-ouest. Un projet, dis-je, a été mis en place pour améliorer le bien-être des populations et le développement économique et social dans ces zones frontalières. La finalité est de réaliser la cohésion sociale dans cette zone et donc la paix entre les trois pays qui y partagent une ressource importante en eau, composée de bassins versants du Niger, du Bandama et également du Sassandra. Autour de cette ressource en eau en particulier, le projet de développement intégré du Ouassoulou va réaliser des aménagements hydro-agricoles pour booster la production vivrière de la zone. Et il ambitionne même de générer de la valeur ajoutée aux produits agricoles de la zone en facilitant les échanges commerciaux entre les trois pays et bien sûr l'installation d'unités de transformation. Mesdames et messieurs, voici ainsi exposé l'exemple d'une zone devenue aujourd'hui symbole de création d'une paix durable, alors qu'elle était jadis le théâtre même potentiel de conflits sociaux et un lieu de rivalité. Au demeurant, un tel projet a un impact positif sur notre société à plusieurs niveaux. S'agissant du volet environnemental, l'on note qu'en rationalisant la gestion des ressources en eau par le biais du projet, on préserve l'environnement et les écosystèmes des bassins versants transfrontaliers qui sont concernés par le dit projet intégrateur. Ce sont en effet les problèmes de dégradation des écosystèmes de ces cours d'eau transfrontaliers qui sont à la base du stress des politiques dans les différents pays et donc à la base des contentieux qui dégradent la paix. Dans le cas, par exemple, du projet Ouassoulou, une étude d'impact environnemental et social a même été réalisée pour garantir ses bienfaits environnementaux. Ce projet a également un impact politique très notable qu'il convient de souligner. Il crée en effet une solidarité agissante entre les peuples des pays frontaliers concernés. Ces peuples se sentent ainsi rapprochés et les sources de conflits se transforment peu à peu en sources de coopération pour une paix véritable et pour une paix durable. Cette coopération peut se faire, comme je l'ai dit tantôt, par la mise en place d'un organisme de bassin ou par le biais des ministères en charge de coopération entre États. Et au niveau du projet Ouassoulou, le ministère d'État en charge des affaires étrangères est particulièrement impliqué dans sa mise en œuvre, bien sûr en collaboration avec le ministère d'État, ministère de l'Agriculture et du Développement rural, qui en assure la maîtrise d'ouvrage. Mesdames et messieurs, il n'y a pas que dans les zones frontalières que l'on peut mener des projets capables de renforcer la paix régionale. Au sein même de nos pays, il est possible de conduire des projets à fort potentiel de stabilisation des bases de vie communautaire, loin des zones frontalières, en se basant sur le triptyque eau, énergie, alimentation. Il suffit pour cela de s'approprier les outils technologiques de pointe en vue de réduire le stress lié à l'utilisation des ressources transfrontalières en eau. En Côte d'Ivoire, nous sommes en train de mettre en place ce type de projet dans le cadre du programme national d'investissement agricole de deuxième génération, dénommé PENIA 2. Il s'agit précisément de projets eau et énergie pour l'alimentation basés sur la promotion de l'utilisation d'innovations technologiques dans l'interface eau, énergie, alimentation. Dans ces projets, l'on ambitionne l'utilisation de technologies plus économiques en eau, basées sur l'énergie solaire pour la production alimentaire. En un mot, il s'agit de l'installation de kits de pompage solaire et de stockage d'eau pour l'irrigation goutte à goutte tout au long des principaux fleuves du pays. Utilisé principalement pour l'agriculture familiale, ce type de projet en eau et en énergie pour l'alimentation est non seulement une alternative viable pour l'adaptation au changement climatique, mais il constitue également un moyen sûr pour réduire le stress hydrique et énergétique dans le processus de production alimentaire. En effet, l'utilisation rationnelle de l'eau grâce à l'irrigation goutte à goutte à partir d'une source d'énergie renouvelable en eau peut, pour la production donc, alimentaire, libère énormément de ressources en eau pour d'autres communautés qui sont en aval, voire d'autres peuples pour ce qui est des fleuves transfrontaliers. En fin de compte, le risque de manquer d'eau et ou d'énergie que redoutent les politiques des pays riverains ayant des sources en eau communes est minimisé parce que réduisant en même temps les risques de conflits régionaux. Mesdames et messieurs, En plus des pistes de coopération pour renforcer la paix en Afrique, dans le cadre du Nexus eau, énergie, alimentation, je tiens à donner ces deux exemples de projets structurants et intégrateurs qui, s'ils sont bien menés, peuvent transformer les sources de tension en sources de coopération et de dialogue. Ces types de projets peuvent canaliser les conflits liés à l'utilisation des ressources transfrontalières en eau afin de permettre une meilleure sécurité alimentaire et sociale des peuples. En un mot, en se basant sur du concret, on peut créer des environnements de paix durable, là où le nexus eau, énergie, alimentation pourrait prendre des tournants de guerre. C'est pourquoi il faudra insister sur le caractère potentiellement confligène de la construction des infrastructures de mobilisation de l'eau sur les bassins versants entre les pays voisins qui se les partagent sans un minimum de concertation. Il faudra dans ce cas proposer le renforcement des capacités financières des organismes de gestion des bassins versants existants et l'accélération de la mise en place de nouveaux organismes de gestion là où cela est nécessaire, et je crois que ceux-ci constituent de véritables cadres de dialogue entre États. Pour ma part, je reste persuadé que les innovations technologiques actuelles permettront de garantir une plus grande sécurité énergétique, hydrique et alimentaire, qui également gage de paix pour l'ensemble des peuples de notre région. Et je voudrais clore mon propos tout en vous remerciant, vous les organisateurs de ce forum, pour m'avoir donné l'occasion de m'exprimer sur un sujet aussi complexe que primordial pour la paix en Afrique. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for sharing with us the experience that Côte d'Ivoire has in enhancing the regional cooperation and also working in the border areas and the different communities. And I think this is a manifestation of how can Africans deal with the African issues of vulnerability, potential, as you have mentioned, potential conflicts coming or arising from a competition on resources, and how can countries work together to ensure that the best coordination and cooperation in this regard. Your proposal is very much welcomed, and I'm sure it will be taken forward by our colleagues in the forum and put in the right context. So thank you again so much, Excellency, for being with us and also for bringing the experience to us. Second in the panel, I have Her Excellency, the Commissioner Josefa Leonel Correa Sacco. She is the Commissioner of Agriculture, Rural Development, Low Economy and Sustainable Development in the African Union Commission. So you will be next on our panel. Excellency, the African Union Peace and Security Council communique of 1051 meeting has highlighted how climate change is a threat multiplier to peace and security landscape in Africa, including on food and water insecurity, loss of livelihoods, failure of management of natural resources, scarcity of water resources, climate-induced displacements, and possibly aggravating existing vulnerabilities, tensions, and conflicts. These changes materialize prominently in the Sahel region with the shrinking of the Lake Chad Basin, which has enormous consequences on food and water security. Responding to this year's African Union theme is focused on food security of the African continent, particularly amidst the international geopolitical tension. In this regard, what are the lessons learned and the best practices in leveraging adaptation of agriculture and food systems to mitigate the impacts of water scarcity and climate change? And what are the possible pathways and recommendations for advancing coordinated and integrated responses across the Humanitarian, Agriculture, and Peace and Security Commissions? So, Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Moderator. Good afternoon, every one of you. Your Excellency, Minister of Senior Minister of Agriculture of the Republic of La Côte d'Ivoire, Excellencies, ambassadors present here, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol duly observed. So let me thank the organizer for inviting African Union to be here to share our experience and how we are trying to mitigate this nexus, water, energy, and with you. African Union, as you said it rightly, African Union Peace and Security Council communique of 1051 meeting rightly highlighted how climate change is a threat multiplier to the peace and security landscape in Africa, aggravating existing vulnerabilities, tension, and conflicts, and then exacerbating food and water insecurity, loss of livelihood, failure of management of natural resources, scarcity of water resources, and climate-induced displacement. Those are really the results of the vulnerability that we are facing on the continent due to climate change. So I really commend this institution to bring it on board and let us really try to solve this problem as soon as possible. As we are aware, still the communique really highlights some lessons and some core example that existential example that Africa is going through, which is the Lake Chad. Everybody knows what is happening in Lake Chad and what are the consequences with this terrorism of Boko Haram. This is really a case study. This is a lesson that we have to prevent, we have to prevent to get up to that thing, to that level, the stage of the Lake Chad's shrinking. We know that it's a natural phenomenon, but we need to really take measures. There are measures of correcting what is happening. As I shared with you yesterday, since I was elected as a commissioner in this area, one of the first missions I did was really to organize a summit on the problem of Lake Chad at a very high level with head of state in Abuja to see how we can really mitigate the effect of climate change, mostly drought, in that part of Africa. We are still on it up to today. We haven't started implementing what we put in our communique in Abuja, because the issue there is to pump, to bring water. Africa has a lot of rivers and water. To bring water to that Lake Chad so that life starts and we can mitigate the impact of the Boko Haram and all the issue of transhumances in that region. But up to now, we are still on discussion. Who is paying what is doing not? I commend the support we got from the Italian government to make a study, because the Republic of Congo asked for a study to see the impact of pumping water from the River Congo to Lake Chad. How will it impact the livelihood, the sustainability of the River Congo? But the study is ready. The study is already ready. But now we need negotiation. Who pays what? Who is doing what? So all these, I think ICAS is in the best place to give us more insight about the progress that has been made since 2018. But it's very, very important that we address this issue. Mostly now, with all these shocks that we are going through, and with anger, with all the statistics, the prediction that we are receiving from the World Bank, the FAO, so we really need to put it as a priority. And I wish during the COP27, we bring it up, and we discuss it at a very, very high level so that we can help our brothers from that region, in the Sahel with the Lake Chad. Lake Chad has to be revitalized. It is very important if we want to bring peace in that part of the world. We also have another problem on the Horn of Africa with the droughts. Somalia is really in acute hunger, and we need to bring solution. There is no water over there. For the past 5 years, the rains were very, very unpredictable, and there is no way of really reducing the issue of hunger and the death of animals, pastoralism in that region. They are very much involved in the livestock. So I think we are witnessing all these two regions of our continent, and we really need to come and support them. We also have another problem of drought as well. We have the drought in southern region. If you go to Namibia, there's no water. And even South Africa, recently in 2018, they had such shortage, water stress in South Africa. So all these are impact of the climate change. I think we need to mobilize more and showcase, in terms of access to all these the green funds, the global environmental fund. We need to assess it because it's really an issue. It's really an issue. If you want peace, we are talking about the nexus with peace. If you want peace and stability, those are the type of action. And I also commend the minister, the senior minister of de la Côte d'Ivoire, who said about this initiative of Wasulu. It's very important, this transbordering issues, and create really a community, bring livelihoods, bring work, and we are trying to do it with the Great Green Wall in the Sahel. We are doing a lot with that, planting trees and bringing the family, displacement people to resettle them, because resettlement should be one of our our core, because we are not happy to start mobilizing money for humanitarian. Humanitarian is as if you are going to bury your person in the cemetery. It's not good. We need to, of course, pledge money for reconstruction, for development. That is the way forward that Africa should follow if we want to survive and be an important actor in this global world. So those are the things. To respond to your first question, that was just an introduction. Let me go quickly. And still on the same way, unless action is taken now, the impact of climate change on food security, aided by insecurity, COVID-19, and now the geopolitical tension are also affecting the gain we have made in the past 5 years, and progress towards the attainment of our Malabo Declaration and the SDG ending hunger and poverty in 2030 will not be attained. And if we want to align and make progress also on the theme of the year of African Union 2022, which is building resilience in nutrition and food security, if you don't really take proper action, even our theme of the year, we will not really galvanize, we will not really take advantage of this theme of the year to solve a lot of core issues that this sector of food insecurity in Africa is going through. That is why we are working in close collaboration, because most of the thing in Africa is not lack of a framework, it's not lack of policy, it's not lack of program. We do have programs, we have policy, but it's a lack of investing, finance. Finance is core. So we are working right now with the ADB, the African Development Bank, that has an initiative on African emergency food production plan that we launched about 2 weeks ago. The African Union joined the ADB to really make sure that the 4 commodities that were selected due to the Ukrainian and Russian crisis, we selected 4 staple food to produce in our continent. And we mobilized money. I commend the ADB and the African Union for this effort. We were able to really pledge, and we had about $1.5 billion to produce maize, wheat, rice, and soybeans on our continent for the next 4 planting seasons. I think this is really a response to this rising of food prices and increased production in our continent. This was done 2 weeks ago. I was in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, and then we launched this important initiative to help our farmers, to help our country to be sovereign. Because today, talking of food security, we have to look at the vision of sovereignty, food sovereignty. Let us produce and feed Africa after we feed the world. So this is really one aspect that we wanted to share with you, that when we want, of course we can. When we are together, when we work together, when we have synergy, we can go mobilize funds, and then we will do our work. We hope that this fund that is available, 1.5, will really go to the right objective of this project. That is what I want. Farmers should have access to their seed, and farmers to produce, organize farmers organization, so that Africa can produce. We have all the ecosystem to produce the 4 commodities. Rice in West Africa, you have a lot of experience. Maize in East Africa, a lot of experience. And other commodities, soybean, cereals, I think you can have it in Southern Africa and elsewhere. So no other sector is more sensitive, as we know, to climate change than agriculture, which is agriculture-fed. We have rain-fed agriculture. We depend mostly on the rain-fed, the variability of the weather, of the climate. So we need to really start looking how can we, what are the response that you ask me, what are the pathway that we need to look at these issues. So my areas where I can share with you that we need to reinforce, first is make agriculture, forestry, and fishery more productive and more sustainable by promoting the climate-smart agriculture. Here, this one is very important as the way to increase productivity. Our productivity is very low. As a way also to adapt, to make the adaptation programs and resilience to the food system, and whenever it's possible, to reduce also the greenhouse gas emission on the continent. This is very important because our productivity is a case, and that's where we need to support our research institution. I'm talking about the National Research Institution. Côte d'Ivoire has CNRA. They were working very well. I don't know what is the status of our research institution. As an agronomist, I'm really worried about it because you cannot do agriculture without looking and investing 1%. Our head of state in African Union, they say we should invest 1% to the research. And we have the scientists. Africa has the think tank. Africa has skill to do this research, to produce us climate-smart agriculture. The second one is irrigation and drought management through well-coordinated national drought policy and the implementation of related action plan. This involves awareness raising and building national capacity to carry out the assessment and implement preparedness plan that incorporate emergency response program. I think our national budget should look at all these things and incorporate, and when we have this type of action, we should not go and start asking for money. It should be part of our budget on the national national development plan of any nation, because the climate change is affecting all the region of Africa, mostly sub-Saharan, even the northern part of Africa. We are all affected. So it's good if we start taking it really as one also of the program. We have ministries of environment. So let us look at these areas of irrigation, drought, is very important. The third one, my friend is here from FAO. FAO has been assisting some countries to help them ensuring enabling environment for farmers, creating an enabling environment for farmers to adopt and to adopt and use crops, trees, and livestock and fish so that they can produce. So we continue working with FAO. At the African Union, we have a task force during the COVID-19 pandemic. We set up a task force, and we are trying to start with our task force action because the shocks are there. So that's where we reflect and we work together to find solutions when we have all these type of pandemics and hazards. So the reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation is one of the areas also, in an effort to create financial value from the carbon stored of forests, offering incentive for developing countries to reduce emission from forested land and invest in low carbon path to sustainable development. The Congo Basin is well advanced in this issue. Restoring degraded forest and dry land, we had the COP15 in Cote d'Ivoire, and a lot of recommendation came from there. I think we should really leverage, track from those recommendations that came during the COP15 on desertification and bring it an issue and start implementing. Assisting countries to reduce food loss and waste. We know that 20 to 30% of what we produce due to the lack of a storage facility has been lost. So, and this is a major contributor to climate change, accounting for about 8% of the global greenhouse gas emission, as well as being the misuse of resources, including water, land, energy, labor, and capital. With about 1/3 of human-induced emission ending up in the ocean, they act as a planet larger active carbon sink. Oceans and the freshwater aquatic system are critical to global food security and key to regulate the world's climate. We need resilience and efficient fishery and aquaculture. We were in Nigeria last week, and we're trying to promote fishery and blue economy initiative, mostly involving women too, women and the youth in this important sector that we have, because 38% of our countries are coastal in Africa. This is a potential that we have started working on it to reduce poverty. Finally, implementation of the program of the 3 climate commission are critical for ensuring food nutrition and security in Africa. During the Marrakech, the COP 16 that we had in Marrakech, we created the African Union 3 commission, the Sahel Climate Commission, the Basin Congo Basin Climate Commission, and the Island Climate Commission. These 3 commissions are already operational, but we really need to build the capacity of these 3 commissions so that we can implement our NDCs, because the objective is really to save the planet and also create livelihoods of the community over there. So with this, I think a harmonized approach could be implemented at the African Union if we implement our African Union climate, as I said yesterday, climate change and resilient development strategy, where all these topics we are talking have been embedded in that climate change strategy. So I think we have the tool. Now we have to go together, mobilize funds so that we can implement and leverage and report so that we can have a better Africa and attain our agenda 2063, the goals of our agenda 2063, the Africa we want, where everybody has access to 3 square meals, and also our global agenda, the SDG Agenda 2030. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, Madam Commissioner, and thank you so much for highlighting the efforts done by the African Union, by the Commission, be it on the climate strategy or be it working with the African Development Bank on mobilizing the 1.5 billion for food security, and also for highlighting the importance of working through the commissions on climate change, the 3 commissions that you mentioned, and also working through the African Union on a holistic approach as an African continent. You also highlighted 2 very important elements at the beginning, the impact of climate change that goes beyond the economic impacts. You mentioned the social impacts, and it's the role of vulnerability that would lead into terrorism, and also the way that we can use adaptation and funding for adaptation to reduce climate vulnerabilities and economic vulnerabilities. So thank you so much again for your contribution for answering the questions. Next on my list, I have a virtual participation. I don't know if they are, if she's there or not. Kelly Ann Naylor. So can I get a confirmation? Yes. Okay. Kelly is the vice chair of the UN Water. The UN Water, in its capacity as a coordination mechanism, is best positioned within the UN system to address the Nexus approach. Kelly, so if you can share with us, how can we divide responsibilities without working in silos in a UN system-wide approach to implement the water, food, energy ecosystem Nexus, especially in Africa? And what is required to enhance the capacity of UN Water to that end, taking into account the global build-up towards the UN 2023 Water Conference? So Kelly, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nasser. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tremendous pleasure to be here today, and I think this conversation and just listening to the intervention so far are so much at the core of what the challenges that we're facing, but also the solutions that we need to carry us forward. And I'm here today in my capacity as Vice Chair of UN Water, which many of you know is the coordination mechanism in the UN for water and sanitation. And this mechanism has grown out of many years of collaboration between UN agencies, funds, and programs, because there's no one single entity in the United Nations that specializes on water. And we often say that water runs through the work of the United Nations, and we have 34 UN entity members and 44 partner organizations that work together to support UN member states to sustainably manage water and sanitation. So I just first wanted to kind of start with the global picture that we're looking at as a UN system when we look at the question of water. And I wanted to just quickly share some data and numbers. And one of the things that we do as UN Water is to work together with the custodian agencies of the different targets for SDG 6 to put together a summary progress update. And this really helps us look at the trajectory of progress, to take stock of where we are, but also to look at the acceleration that's needed. And I think when we look back over the past 20 years, we have been able to track that there has been measurable progress. And I think particularly in areas, for example, billions of people have transformed their lives by having the human rights to water and sanitation fulfilled. And some of the areas where we see positive signs are that we see global leaders in other sectors realizing how SDG 6 on water and sanitation is absolutely critical to many development objectives and humanitarian imperatives. And we've heard that very much today from the speakers, whether we're making these for food security, economic growth, education, gender equality, sustainability, and environmental protection. Many of them are, of course, linking to the progress that we're making on SDG 6. But I think we can also really see that we're very much off track to meet the goals that we've set for universal access to water and sanitation by 2030. And we have now, with the data that's been collected thus far, we've measured that with our current rates of progress, we would need to quadruple the areas to reach the targets by 2030. So I think setting those sites that we have, we definitely recognize the need that we must go faster. And just to put it in perspective, when we look at the distance that's still needed to cover, we see 2.3 billion people living in water-stressed countries, of which 733 million live in high and critically high water-stressed areas. And particularly within the Northern Africa and Western Asia regions, many countries are currently withdrawing their renewable water resources, which would be at least up to 100% per year. And we even have some countries that are reporting withdrawals up to 1,000% of their renewable water resource levels. And we also have many countries that are reliant on non-renewable resources to meet their water needs, which of course eventually will run dry, such as the groundwater that's extracted from confined aquifers. I think in the food area, we've looked at 72% of water withdrawals being used by agriculture, But we're also recognizing that 3.2 billion people live in agricultural areas with high to very high water shortages or scarcity, and around 1.2 billion people, which is around 1/6 of the world's population, live in severely water-constrained agricultural areas. So when we really look at this comprehensive picture of the water situation globally, and of course building on what we've learned through the pandemic, I definitely see that responding to these challenges, that our common destiny and our shared vulnerability is clear. And this is, of course, as was outlined also by the other speakers, that when we bring in climate change, water scarcity, the food crisis, population growth and migration, and the changing nature of conflicts, we only see that the need for water security increases. And I think just as we said, that the water is also a public good, and while it makes the links to the Sustainable Development Goals, it also links to the other pillars of the UN system, which of course are the human rights pillar and also the peace and security. And I think bringing that to the attention within the UN system has been something we've been working on quite a bit over the past years, and really kind of elevating the visibility that water can be both an essential element for universal social protection, but it can also be a trigger for social unrest. It can be a source of peace and stability, but it can also be a risk of conflict. I think we've been trying to look at how to position water as a pathway to protecting our planet, preserving biodiversity, and adapting to climate change, but it can also be a driver for environmental displacement. And I think it's kind of in this context that we've been trying to elevate the prioritization of water as being very much critical for policymakers globally. And so I think if we're going to respond to this as a UN system, we definitely need to step up our efforts to champion water, and that this issue really does provide an opportunity for the UN system to demonstrate putting into practice the humanitarian, development, and sustaining peace triple nexus. I think just to say, different UN organizations, as we've talked about, that comprise UN water, have different priority themes, whether they focus on water from a food angle, from an environmental angle, through disaster risk reduction, child protection, or gender equality. I think it does make the UN system a very multi-sectoral approach to working on water, and this is an asset. But I think also the fact that this is linking to many different mandates can also make it challenging for the UN system to have a system-wide strategy, and also kind of garner the required political commitment and dedicated resources to the topic of water. So these are, I think, kind of looking at the glass half empty and the glass half full, these are the challenges that we're going to need to unlock to work together as a UN system, not only across the pillars of the UN system and our sectors, but also really bridging between kind of the political engagement of the UN system with the technical work that our agencies are doing. So these are some of the challenges that we're looking at. Now, Ambassador Nasser, you asked about kind of looking forward to the UN 2023 conference, and this is, of course, very exciting. This is going to be the first UN conference dedicated to the topic of water since 1977. So this is going to be a great opportunity for us to bring this to the global platform of the United Nations. But of course, this is going to come in March 2023, following on from COP27, where we know water scarcity will also be on the agenda. So I think just wanted to offer three insights on what we think we need to do on this lead up that we have coming up to the 2023 conference. I think the first one is to shift perspectives. And in 2019, we realized, released the UN Water Policy Brief on climate change and water. And in this policy brief, we stressed the urgency of linking together improving water management, ensuring transboundary collaboration, and rethinking financing. And we've heard today that the financing piece is critical to being able to increase the investments that we need for these solutions. And I think this is really, where we need to push ourselves, and we need very thought-provoking suggestions on how to move from, kind of looking at the water crisis and seeing it as a threat or as a problem, but to also see how our investment in water can very much be a part of the solutions. And so to this end, we definitely, drawing on also what the other speakers have said, we must have proactive agricultural policies and risk management to build greater societal resilience to the effects of climate change and reduce the need for the humanitarian response, which comes sometimes at a trade-off with investment in durable solutions. And I think this is going to require a fundamental shift in the way that agriculture, as the largest freshwater user, is perceived and managed. The second one is around something I talked about earlier, which is acceleration. And we've talked about the fact that we need to go faster and move from incremental progress to more transformative and faster progress into that. And we've developed a SDG 6 Global Acceleration Framework, which has had the full backing of the United Nations family to be able to join us together in how we want to accelerate progress. And we've identified 5 accelerator areas: financing, data and information, capacity development, innovation, and governance. And through these accelerators, we want to bring partners together to be able to have stronger collective action and collaboration to really bring forth this multiplier effect, not only to accelerate SDG 6, but also other SDGs that are closely related, with SDG 2 for zero hunger and SDG 13 for climate change. And the third and final recommendation that I wanted to bring up was to kind of broaden and interconnect the dialogues. And I think we talked about, from a UN perspective, that we have a number of global frameworks. Last year we had the Food Systems Summit, which included a global dialogue on water to help bring together the food community and the water community. And I think also, as we look now towards the 2023 Water Conference, Tajikistan and the Netherlands, who are our co-hosts, really aim to have an action-oriented, inclusive, and cross-sectoral conference. So I think we must use this opportunity, and I'm confident that we will, to be able to move across the silos to bring together expertise, experience, and solutions from food, climate, and energy communities to address our common challenges, of which water can be a solution. And I think also just to note that there's also will be the review of the Sendai framework, which is of course alongside Paris Agreement, very closely interlinked with the medium of water, looking at climate change and disaster risk reduction. So just to close on the final question, Ambassador, that you asked me around increasing the capacity of UN water. We are a coordination mechanism, and we are our members and our partners. And the UN water is really as strong as the commitment of the UN system entities to collaborate and come together. And I think this is not only globally, but also the presence of the UN at regional levels and at country levels within our UN country teams. So kind of in that light, I think ways that we can support coordination and improve coordination as a UN system, that this will have better results for us to be a better partner of the countries, member states, communities, and stakeholders that we serve. And in terms of reinforcing our capacity, I think by inviting us to participate in this type of forum, or requesting support from UN Water, it helps us to be a more and effective use of unlocking our resources that our members and partners to be a relevant coordination platform and more effective, as I said. So on that, I'll close up, and it's been a pleasure to be here today and to be a part of this really important and timely dialogue. Thank you very much, and back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thank you so much for this comprehensive overview and also giving us a comprehensive picture of water-related issues. Quick takes from what you mentioned. Yes, water can be the source of stability, and also it can trigger conflict, it can trigger many risks, and it can be a driver for displacement. And yes, I also agree with what you have mentioned on the humanitarian development and sustaining peace nexus. We took your 3 insights, and I think those are very good. And again, the call for acceleration of action goes across the board. It is in water, it is in climate change, it is in dealing with desertification, it is across the board. So we hope that this call for accelerating actions and moving as quickly as possible and doing the transformation that is needed reaches all the different stakeholders. So thank you again. Next, I have Ms. Gwari Singh. She is the Deputy Director General of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and she will be talking to us about renewable energy and the nexus of water renewable energy. Let me first highlight that while Africa is one of the richest continents in renewable energy sources, more than 48% of the population has no access to power at a time where the world is shifting towards sustainable energy. The transition towards sustainable energy can pose both risks and opportunities for sustainable peace and development on the continent, particularly in the midst of the concurrent crises, including climate change and the implications of COVID-19 pandemic. This requires a very careful management of trade-offs to mitigate risks that could be associated with this transition, while leveraging opportunities of leapfrogging towards sustainable, reliable, and affordable energy sources, as well as strengthening transboundary cooperation in Africa. In light of this, and also taking into consideration the recent report by IRENA on Africa and its findings on climate, water, food, energy nexus, how can we foster regional cooperation around the nexus while bearing in mind the dire need for peaceful and just transition as an important African priority? So I hope, Gwari, you can help us with these questions and give us some insights from IRENA and IRENA's views. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to this very important discussion. And I think, Ambassador Nasser, what we've heard in this panel has really some very key points that I'll try and build when I make as I make my intervention. So just starting with the fact that this is at IRENA we have pretty much since our inception we have taken the view of not looking at renewable energy and energy transition only from the point of view of technology, but we recognize that energy transition is closely linked to the economy, to the society, and to the planet. So it has to be looked at in a very holistic manner, and which is why I think the discussion today that sets to address the water, energy, food nexus in Africa and its relation to climate and peace is so important. So, and if you're looking at the context in Africa, I think it could be more pertinent because when you're looking at accelerating renewables, you're really not looking at only renewables as a means of tackling access to electricity or increasing the access to clean cooking, but it also is a means of advancing the region's ambition and aspiration for industrialization, job creation, and for meeting other socio-economic development goals. Our report, as you mentioned, Ambassador, on renewable energy market analysis for Africa and its region, which we developed in collaboration with the African Development Bank, strongly argues for and provides evidence on why we need to link energy transition in Africa and associated investment in capacity flows with its industrialization and socio-economic development goals. And this is something that really is an intersectoral discussion and policy making that needs to happen. So one of the key interlinkages that really needs to be addressed is that when you're talking about this nexus, every aspect of society and the economy has to be considered. And we think, for example, that in the agriculture sector, for instance, which is a key livelihood in Africa, accounting for nearly half of the total employment in 2020, food systems need to transform to meet the growing food demand. And energy is an important enabler, right from primary production to processing and to storage. And yet, the recent report of IRENA and FAO highlights that despite hosting around 15% of the global population, energy used in the production stage in Africa is only about 4% of the global total. So, there is a huge scope for the agriculture sector to become more mechanized with irrigation pumps, with farm machinery, processing equipment, and inputs like fertilizers and all. So similarly, even in the water sector, we see that the number of people lacking safe drinking water has in fact increased by more than 40% since 2000. So climate-related variability is impacting water availability, and we've seen in the region with prolonged droughts that strongly influence food and energy security. Only about 3% of the land in Africa is irrigated, and adaptation measures will require energy for desalination, for pumping, conveyance, and treatment. So energy choices that we make today in agriculture or water sectors will strongly influence long-term sector resilience, security of supply, including affordability. And as we see, there's a very strong correlation between fuel prices and food. So, it's often talked about whether we have the kind of solutions that we're looking for. And I just want to highlight here that the renewable energy solutions are increasingly available and have demonstrated their viability to meet the energy needs in both agriculture and the water sector. If I can give some examples, solar irrigation pumps and decentralized renewables-based agro-processing and cold storage equipment are reducing fossil fuel expenditure and helping reduce food losses, and also increasing the productivity and the income of farmers. And our estimate shows that just the solar pump capacity in Africa has grown has doubled in fact from 7 megawatts in 2016 to 14 megawatts in 2019. So, if you're even looking at Egypt, we've seen how rapidly the adoption of water pumping for farms and poultry and other agri-processing centers. We've seen renewable energy getting more and more used by farmers for these kind of operations. We've seen in Rwanda how small-hold farmers, their yields are growing as they use solar irrigation. We've seen how cold storage in infrastructure in Kenya, which is decentralized, is really helping reduce the losses and making market access for farmers better. as along, increasing their incomes. And renewables in the water sector, especially if you're talking about desalination and other treatment processes, are increasingly competitive. And given the kind of decentralized nature that they have, it's very easy to take these solutions to scale. If I talk about the peacekeeping settings and the humanitarian context, IRENA is a part of a coalition of countries and agencies, including UNOPS, UNHCR, UNDPO, UAE and Norway, to increase the use of renewables in peacekeeping and humanitarian context as well, to both improve energy access and reduce energy costs. So what really would it take to get this Nexus operationalized? And we think that partnerships are going to be the key, and these are partnerships at the national level, at the local level, at the regional level. It's important to break silos because this, as we all understand, is something that requires the intersectoral discussion and dialogue to happen. Policy making also would need to take into account the impact which any policy could have on other sectors as well. And IRENA has been working very closely with FAO, ICIMOD, UNDP, and with governments to undertake agri-food value chain assessments and trying to facilitate renewable energy investments. So we've also seen that these kind of Nexus solutions have to be implemented with a very strong involvement of communities, farmers, the financial sector, the banks, and other end users. So if a really good example of a regional partnership is the West and Central African Alliance for Biodigester, which is an initiative of 8 West African countries with the aim of promoting large-scale dissemination of biodigesters that utilize agriculture and livestock waste to generate energy for cooking and electricity. So there are many such examples, and these actually have to be, many more need to come into place. The second very important thing we feel is to facilitate funding into these kind of integrated solutions, because traditionally funding flows have follow the sectoral silos, and it's important to facilitate financing for cross-sectoral solutions, including climate financing for mitigation and adaptation. So there are some donor-led funds that are emerging, but regional cooperation can help devise dedicated funding channels for Nexus solutions. For example, renewables in agriculture or water sectors that look not only at the technology dimension, but really focus on building capacities and building an ecosystem that has to work along with it. The other aspect that we think is very important. Excuse me.
Yeah, bless you. We have 2 minutes because they are telling me that we are running out of time. So, Excellency, if you can wrap up in 2 minutes.
I'll do that. So I think it's important to also have improved the evidence base to manage trade-offs and inform policy making. And finally, translate all these opportunities and dedicated programs into targets so that there is a very clear pathway moving ahead. So overall, while all these elements are important and must form a part of an ambitious initiative like the African Green Deal, which our report calls for, I think the important thing to note is that anything that we take forward should be transformative and should recognize that just market-driven approaches will not suffice, but we need very strong public interventions that place people at the center for moving forward with a just and inclusive energy transition. So I'd like to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Back to you, Ambassador.
Thank you so much, and apologies for cutting you short, but yes, I mean, you mentioned very important elements, including the public investments and the work that is being done by ARENA to move forward on renewable energy and the Nexus to water. And it seems that there are a lot of success stories happening in West Africa that we'll be looking at, and you already heard from the different panelists on this. Next on my list, I have Mr. Eduardo Mansour. He's a director in the Office of Climate Change, Biodiversity and Environment, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, the FAO. Mr. Mansour, earlier this month, the Food and Agriculture Organization and the United Nations World Food Programme issued a stark report warning of multiple looming food crises, driven by conflict, climate shocks, the fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic, and the massive public debt burdens amidst a destabilized international situation. According to this report, 3 out of the 4 highest alert countries as hotspots with catastrophic conditions are in Africa. In your view, how exactly can adaptive agriculture measures ensure food security in the regions most affected by fragility, water scarcity, and vulnerability to the effects of climate change? And what are the possible pathways to operationalize the water-food-energy nexus in Africa in a manner that contributes to peace and development through increased cooperation? And before giving you a floor, I please ask you to stay within 5 to 6 minutes. I'm being told that we are running out of time. Mr. Eduardo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Nasser. On behalf of the FAO, we would like to thank you for the opportunity of being here. My colleagues, as you know, Egypt is very important for us because we have our regional office based here in Cairo, covering North Africa and Near East. And my colleagues gave me the honor to come all the way from Rome to represent the organization in this specific event. I would like to recognize the presence of our Assistant Director General, Dr. Abdel Hakim, who accompanied me here, and other colleagues from the office. Also, we are very honored to be in this panel. Monsieur le ministre Djanzi, les Nations Unies nous reconnaissons les efforts et la collaboration de la Côte d'Ivoire pour l'organisation de la conférence de désertification le mois de mai à Abidjan a été excellent. Merci. I will keep my 5 minutes, try to respond to your question on the adaptive measures for Africa. It's true, you mentioned the report, joint report of FAO and WFP. We are living through a food crisis. In 2022, after the pandemic, and in a planet that produces food for its whole population. We have food for 12 billion people, and we are only 7 billion in the planet. So why we are living through a food crisis? And 2 main reasons are the object of the discussion on this forum. It's a conflict, social unrest, and climate change. And this caused the disruption on the food chains, this caused the crisis we are living through on markets, on energy, and the opportunity of being here to discuss it is particularly important because the pandemic just aggravated the scenario that has been threatening us. Climate change is permanent. It's not changing. It's here now. It's not something for the future. It changed the water cycle, and this affects lives, affects particularly agriculture, and requires adaptive measures to build resilience. The phenomenon is global, climate change, but let's look at the perspective of Africa and understand it. And I'll take it from the food aspect for us to conclude together the importance for it in Africa. When we have droughts, 80% of the impact of droughts are on food production, being it in crops or livestock. And in a continent that the economies are heavily dependent, the economies and the social fabric are heavily dependent on food production, of course droughts impact tremendously. So the impact on Africa is exacerbated as it is in small island development states. So Africa economy are particularly fragile to the effects of climate change that are being more frequent, more severe. By nature, African soils are low fertile. Without water, because it's a very old continent and geologically, so the soils have low fertility, and the lack of availability of water in a continent where Madam Commissioner mentioned most of agriculture is rain-fed, is problematic. So we have to work on adaptation to identify varieties and identify ways of increasing soil fertility, but we are trapped by the very high costs of fertilizers in this very moment because of the social crisis that we're living through. So I'm just trying to show you the connections that we in the food sector are living through, not necessarily because we don't know how to produce food in Africa. The Africans know how to produce food, but there are externalities at this moment that are blocking it. Another problem is on food loss and waste. About 1/3 of the food that's produced is lost in the production chain or wasted by consumers. And in Africa, it's not because it's incidental, it's because there is lack of infrastructure, especially on energy sector, for conservation of cold chains, for products that are perishable and we lose because of this. And this, as you can see, the problems I'm showing is not because of technology of production. They are externalities that are complex, and if the problems are complex in its entirety, the solutions does not have to be necessarily complex. They have to be innovative. They have, and I'll try to illustrate, because of time, Ambassador, only with one example that I find fascinating that comes from Kenya. As you know, Kenya is, as many other countries in Africa, drought-prone country. And the staple food that's basically maize has been, which is water demanded, has been suffering with the crops. Long story short, through the investigation, research developed in Africa by the researchers that Madam Commissioner mentioned that exist in Kenya, they identified the possibility of introducing varieties of chickpeas, a crop that is more resistant to drought, easier to store, more nutritious, and as a leguminous help fertilizing soils. And today, after some years of research and extension, Kenya has also a market potential because of the Asian descendant community and the link with the South Asia. The consumption of pulses are very high, and they were importers of pulses. But nowadays, about 55,000 hectares, serving about 270,000 families, are producing maize, producing chickpeas, combining with maize. And that irradiated now to Ethiopia and to Tanzania. And you know what happened in Kenya? And I'm talking about the Rift Valley province. Those who know Kenya know that these are very prone, drought-prone regions. And you know what happened? Kenya returned to be importers because they are buying the chickpeas that's now produced in Tanzania and in Ethiopia, industrializing and exporting to Pakistan and India. So it's like, I'm a Brazilian, it's like exporting coffee to Brazil. You see, they are doing a fantastic job in adapting with technology that has been developed local, with a species that has been introduced. You know that chickpeas from this part of the world, from Syria, from Near East originally. It's nutritious also, and it's, as my son would say, it's very cool because it's vegetarian. It's a protein-rich vegetable, so those who are now engaging in vegetarian diets, or those who have vegetarian diets, have a better crop. I'm illustrating with chickpeas because I find it fascinating, but it's not the only solution that links climate, nutritious aspect, and livelihoods. Because the people that now is producing chickpeas are better off. These 270,000 households in Kenya, they are really better off. We have other opportunities in the climate agriculture, in the nexus that we are discussing here, which is the climate with food, water, and energy that can be groundbreaking. And because Egypt is hosting COP27, and now in the region you have in the United Arab Emirates COP28 next year, we have excellent opportunity to turn challenge into opportunities. So the chickpea is illustrative, but we can look at methane. Agriculture sector are responsible for 40% of the methane emission. Methane is 80 times more contaminant to the atmosphere than carbon dioxide. So if you reduce it, we have a much faster impact. We won the fight against the ozone layer, reducing the emissions of this fluoroxide, the gases. We can win the fight of climate change if we include agriculture measures of impact. The 40% emission that comes from the agricultural sector on methane comes from mostly from enteric fermentation of ruminants, from wet rice, and from landfills. We have to address this with innovative technology like the one I described. There are others, Ambassador Nasser, that we can put on the table: low carbon tea, low carbon coffee, the management of food loss and waste with renewable energy, with the smart energy alternatives. I'm not going to enter into much detail, but I would like to conclude with two aspects in terms of investment. It's obvious that Africa needs investment in infrastructure, in investment in the, let's say, in the extension of the technologies to the rural communities. So if we talk about infrastructure, there is one particular point that strikes very much. We always talk about the need to have early warning for farmers to know early the problems they are going to face with climate change. I'm taking my plane to Rome, where I live and work, this evening. I can check in my phone here the weather and know if my flight's going to be bumpy or not from Cairo to Rome. But the farmers in Africa cannot check if they're going to have rain or not, because it's the least digitalized sector in the economy. So if investment is not made to break the digital divide, to make the digital transition in agriculture, putting digital facilities in the hand of the farmers, we cannot talk about early warning because they don't have the tools. A simple tool like the one I described to you. The other factor I would like to inform in terms of investment, where to focus investment. The fragility of the rural people in Africa is particularly exacerbated through the rural women, for the role they have in food production and in the livelihood. So investing in transferring technology to the rural women in Africa, and this has been said by my predecessors in this panel, pays a lot more than investing in the other social groups. So I think with these two aspects, I would like to close, Ambassador. I'm very honored to be here in this panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very informative elements, and just for your info and also the information of distinguished participants. Yes, we are having an Agriculture Day under adaptation in COP27, and yes, we are having Gender Day in COP27, and we're bringing solutions to COP27 so everybody would know what is happening and solutions that could be scaled up and maybe replicated. And we're bringing water in COP27. So all those elements will hopefully have like a wider discussion when we reach the COP, and hopefully we'll have very good outcomes there. So thank you again, and thank you for all this information that you shared with us on the work of FAO. I think the work on reducing loss like in the food system, this is a crucial element for Africa, and I hope that through you and Irina and others who are working with that, we can bring something to COP27 and to the decision makers there. So thank you again. Next, and I'll just tell you, I have only 2 speakers left. So next I have Mr. Tariq Qutb, who is the lead global technical specialist, water and rural infrastructure in the IFAD, the International Fund for Agricultural Development. Mr. Tariq, the implications of climate change, including the increasing temperature and drought, erratic rainfall and floods, are reducing yields, creating uncertainties and endangering natural resources based on livelihoods in Africa. In response to this, IFAD, being the UN leading agency in rural areas, has put effort in building resilience and expanding agricultural businesses of local communities in the face of the looming food and water crisis. Mr. Tar, in light of this, what are some lessons learned from IFAD's sustainable land management efforts to strengthen livelihoods, resilience, and infrastructure systems in the face of climate change in Africa? We'd like to hear from you, and again, please, it's 5 minutes, otherwise we'll be running out of time. So, Mr. Tar, you have the floor.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Good afternoon, Excellencies and colleagues. Pleasure to be with you and greetings from Rome. Let me start with a couple of facts to realize what IFAD has done to address the challenges of improving the livelihoods of poor smallholder farmers in Africa and around the world, and increasing their resilience to climate shocks and conflicts. Why IFAD? IFAD focus on smallholder farmers. So smallholder farmers of less than 2 hectares by definition, in average, operate on only 12% of agricultural land, but produce 35% of the world's food, a very important factor to consider, especially when we note that 95% of these farmers are under increasingly vulnerable rain-fed production. So irrigated agriculture represents 20% of cultivated land and accounts for 40% of global food production, while rain-fed agriculture covers 80% of the world's cultivated land and accounts for only 60% of crop production. So I want to say irrigation can increase the production of rain-fed land by 2 to 3 folds. That's why we in IFAD focus on smallholder irrigation development. In Africa, total cultivated areas is estimated to be 271 million hectares, only 7% of which is irrigated. So you can imagine the huge potential for improving smallholder livelihoods by expanding irrigation, either permanent or supplemental irrigation. Generally speaking, climate change, growing population, and volatile food and energy prices have the potential to push millions of more vulnerable people into extreme poverty and hunger by 2030. Again, we invest in rural poor, empowering them to increase their food security, improve the nutrition of their families, and increase their incomes. We help them build their resilience, expand their business, and take charge of their own development. Let me also tell you that agriculture is the proven engine for poverty reduction. We learned that GDP growth generated by agriculture is more effective in reducing poverty than growth in any other sector. In sub-Saharan Africa, for example, growth in agriculture reduces poverty up to 12 times faster than growth in other sectors. We have also experienced that the primary barrier to improving or expanding smallholder irrigation is the access to a nearby water source, as well as to labor-serving technologies for lifting and distributing water. Harvesting water from catchments, rooftops, yards, roads, and other hard surfaces, whenever appropriate, is a proven way to grouping farmers to construct, operate, and maintain efficient and cost-effective harvesting facility to increase smallholders' access to water, thus to increase irrigation. It has been estimated that adopting water harvesting in cultivated areas can increase agricultural production by up to 60 to 100% in Uganda and Burundi. In the Amhara region of Ethiopia, for example, a package of drip irrigation technology complemented by solar powered pumps and conservation agriculture practices has offered the ultimate solution to farmers groups in terms of sustainability and efficiency, and where used have helped vegetable farmers increase productivity by 30% over conventional approaches, while also reducing water use by at least 30%. Households and women in particular benefited from access to secure sources of water close by their homes for domestic and home garden uses. We also learned important lessons from this experience, that is mainly labor productivity can be up to 10 times greater when replacing traditional manual irrigation methods by the modernized package through farmers' cooperation. Yields and water use efficiency were also significantly increased by using conservation agriculture with mechanized irrigation, and the package of solar pump and drip irrigation increased yields by 15 to 30%. Thus, the annual farm income increased by an average of $2,700 per hectare.
2 minutes.
Tanzania,
2 minutes, Mr.
another
Torre.
example. Sorry?
We have 2 minutes.
Okay. Let me skip the example from Tanzania and come to the main point here. So we have generally learned from the experience all over Africa that the development challenges related to irrigation and water harvesting are not just the technical challenges of applying water to crops and increasing productivity, but a holistic approach to water resources management and the development of infrastructure. And this one is badly needed to avoid overlay of domestic irrigation development plans that may not be sustained. And let me conclude this brief intervention with the estimate documented in our joint publication with the International Finance Corporation, IFC, to be released very soon, that expanding irrigation and increasing irrigated cropland productivity in low-medium income countries would cost between $26 and $50 billion per year over the next 20 years, enabling between 70 and 150 million hectares to be added, or a 32% increase in irrigated areas in developing countries, which largely includes sub-Saharan Africa. Let me stop there and over to you, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tare, and apologies for cutting it short, but I'm sure that your presentation can also be loaded to the website. And thank you so much for bringing the last 2 points on the holistic approach to water and the estimate of what is needed in terms of investments. I think this is very informative. Last speaker in the panel today, she is Ms. Chioma Omi. She's the Manager of Impact and Innovation, Solar Sister Nigeria. Ms. Chioma, you know that over 600 million people in sub-Saharan Africa live without electricity. And since 2014, Solar Sisters have been investing in women's enterprise and off-grid communities to ensure clean energy access in these communities. So, in your view, how can we address the operationalization of water energy food ecosystem nexus on the grassroots level, while accounting for specific needs of communities in most vulnerable situations, including women? And Ms. Chioma, we have 5 minutes. So, to you, the floor is yours. I think is Ms. Chioma online? So I think they are having technical difficulties. No, it's not possible. Connection is not there. Okay, so this gives us 5 minutes of interaction from the floor. So we have 5 minutes for questions, and if any of the distinguished panel, distinguished attendees want to pose a question for the panel, not to me, for the panel, so please do so. I think that was very comprehensive panel. I think so. With no questions, Thank you so much, Excellencies, the ones who have attended with us in person and the ones who have attended virtually. Thank you so much for the very informative discussions and the information that you brought forward, the experience you shared with us, and the information on the activities and how we're moving forward, be it from the African Union Commission, from Côte d'Ivoire, which is leading in the issue of food and water and energy nexus, from FAO, from other organizations. So thank you again, and I would just like to ask you all for a round of applause for this one. Thank you.
Yeah, they're coming Fridays. Tomorrow night I will go to Berlin. Yeah. I have a meeting tomorrow, that's why I'm going back to Addis. I have a meeting, I booked a meeting.
Photo?